And so in 1957, you graduate from the George School and you go down to Atlanta with your family when your father becomes dean at Atlanta University. And was it that same year that you started at Morehouse?
Yes, it was that same fall. We moved in the summertime, and in the fall of '57, I entered Morehouse. And frankly, I was a little frightened about going back south. We had left the South when I was 5, and my home, like other homes, got the Pittsburgh Courier, the Baltimore Afro-American, the black papers of the time, and these papers are filled with these atrocities from the South: lynchings, murders, awful things. And of course, if you don't pay a lot of attention, you think these are common everyday occurrences. And they're not that common, and they're not that everyday, but you think they are, and you think it's going to happen to me. And I remember my mother wanted me to buy a suit to go to college with, and I remember saying, "Mama, you go. They won't hurt you. They won't hurt a woman, but I'm at risk," so I wouldn't go. But I went to Morehouse and settled in very quickly. It was a different experience for me. I had never been to an all-black school until I entered college. All of my, when I was in Fort Valley, it was all-black school, but from the time I was 5 until I entered college, I'd never gone to an all-black institution.
Okay, so then we'll go back to 1957, and you enter Morehouse, and probably at Morehouse you're introduced to you say it's the first all-black educational experience you had, and no doubt you would have been introduced to a broader cross-spectrum of people who perhaps came from much poorer backgrounds than your own?
Yes and no. Having gone to school at Lincoln Village, there were children whose parents were farm workers and children whose parents were university professors. So, and this is true about white and black kids. So there was an economic mix in these public schools in this little town. But at George School, almost all the children were from the upper middle class, and some of the children of people of great wealth, enormous wealth, very, very rich people, and celebrated people. The movie critic of the New York Times, Bosley Crowther's son, was a classmate of mine. Heather Holliday, whose mother was Mary Martin. Remember Mary Martin?
Oh, yes.
I went to school with her. Danny Selznick, whose father was David O. Selznick, and whose mother was Jennifer Jones, second marriage. They were classmates. So I had this array of upper middle class and upper class, economically speaking, people I went to high school with. When I went to college, the mix was more both geographic and economic, because I'm going to college with boys, and this is all male school, from Detroit, from Chicago, from New York, from all over the country, and from the small town South. And many of the boys from the small town South weren't just from poor backgrounds. They were smarter than I was, and that was an adjustment, because they went to awful schools. They had been admitted to Morehouse as high school juniors. Morehouse took you early if you were smart enough. So I'm going to school with kids who didn't have the same educational background I did. I had a superior educational high school background, who had an inferior background, but who had triumphed above it, and who were strivers and strugglers and were whipping past me like nobody's business. That was a shock. That was a big shock.
What did you learn from your Morehouse years? What would you say the primary influences from those times were?
A combination of a couple of professors who didn't influence me so much in the subjects they taught, but in the personalities they had. The guy who taught me math was Professor Dansby. He had a master's degree, one of the rare Morehouse teachers without a doctorate, had a master's from Chicago, and who spoke in near broken English, but who taught me math better than anybody had ever taught me math. For the first time in my life, I understood it. He made it clear to me. He was a consultant at what was then Cape Canaveral. And he used to say to us, he'd say, "Boys, I won't tell you I'm important." He said, "But you notice they don't shoot out one of those rockets until I go down there." So, and that was true. He would go down there and do something, I don't know what, and they'd shoot off a rocket. And he just impressed me that he would be, on the surface, an unlettered person, but in reality, a man of enormous mathematical competence and the ability to communicate what had been a foreign subject to me all through high school. I never got it until I went to college, and Claude Dansby taught me math. Another guy, Gladstone Chandler, what a name. He was an English professor, and he taught a speech class. I took a speech class from him. And I never thought I'd make speeches. I mean, who thinks? But we had to give speeches in class, and I learned how to make a speech. And I'm forever grateful to
So
him.
you've given a few since
yes,
that
I've given
time?
many since then, and I got an understanding of what this is about. The idea at Morehouse is that every educated man will at some time have to speak to an audience, and so we're going to teach you how to do it. And there were others, but those two particularly had a big influence on me.